guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids in our 11th year homeschooling. If you are not subscribed, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you are notified of all of my future videos. Today I am participating in an open collaboration with Abby from Rooted in Rest and Jessica from the Waldock Way with my 3 tips for a successful homeschool. So let's get started. When I saw this topic, I was really excited because I love to see what other homeschoolers are doing in their day-to-day. I do want to preface this video by saying just because these things work well for me does not mean that they will necessarily work well for you. So if I suggest something and it doesn't work for your family, that's totally okay. Homeschooling is so individualized. It is specific for each individual family and even sometimes each student in a family. So these are just my tips and, take what works for you and leave the rest. My first tip is I'm going to say getting out of the public school mindset. Now, I do an entire workshop on getting out of the public school mindset. I will leave a link in the description box if you're interested in being put on the waiting list. I usually run it in the summer, right before homeschool usually starts is a good time for that. But what I mean by getting out of the public school mindset is to not think about the scope and sequence that the public school is doing, what your child should be learning, quote unquote, in first, second, or third grade, letting all of that stuff go. And unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to do because most of us were public schooled in the past. And so when we go into homeschooling, that's what we think of. And so especially when you are just starting out with homeschooling, you have nothing to compare it to. So you automatically think about public school. And, when I say public school mindset, I'm not necessarily just talking about doing school at home, because there are some homeschoolers where that is really successful for them to follow a lot of textbook learning, worksheet-based learning, that type of thing. But what I mean is just that it's almost like that comparison of, is my child doing enough? Are they keeping up with their public school peers? And that can be a real challenge. And the reason is because in homeschooling, depending on your homeschool laws in your individual state, you have so much freedom to choose the topics that you want to cover in the order that you want to cover them. So this means when you are teaching your second grader, perhaps in the public school, they're working on a butterfly unit, but you want to concentrate on nature study. And so you are outside going on nature walks and observing the environment around you while you're out. That's totally okay. There are so many ways to cover the required subjects that it could really be anything. And when you are trying to follow the public school, you end up missing out on a lot of the opportunities that homeschooling allows. When I first started homeschooling, I ended up printing out all of the curriculum and scope and sequence plans that my district was using for the different grades. And so we had already chosen homeschool curriculum. And what I ended up doing was trying to also incorporate what the public school was doing just to make sure I was on track, because I did not have any resources. I did not know anybody that homeschooled in my area. There weren't really any homeschool blogs available. The only person I knew of that was writing about homeschooling when we first started was Jamie C. Martin, and Tish Oxenrider started simplehomeschool.net, and I got a lot of resources, but we had already started homeschooling at that point. So it was a little challenging. I knew that there were people that were following their interests and doing child-led learning, but there wasn't a whole lot of information. And so I leaned back on what I thought was normal, which was public school. Even though I didn't want my kids to be in public school, it was still something that I was thinking about. So when you're first starting, Do not compare yourself to the public school. Figure out the rhythm that works best for you and your family. Figure out the topics that excite you as a teacher and excite your kids as students, and then go in that direction. Now, obviously, you want to be on some sort of trajectory, and that can either be through following specific curriculum or finding resources that are age appropriate for your kids. And I have a few resources that I have used in the past that I think are really worthwhile for homeschoolers. The first is this book, Home Learning Year by Year. This goes from pre-K all the way through 12th grade, and it has different resources listed by subject and topic. So there are all kinds of different things in here, lists of information, and books to use and different ideas to study all of the different subjects. So if you are looking for something that you need age-appropriate resources for, this is a really good resource for that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to follow this completely, but it does give you a good idea because it does have, pre-K through 12th in it. The next book is The Well-Trained Mind. If you are a homeschooler, you've probably heard of Susan Weiss Bauer. She has an enormous number of resources listed in this book as far as different curriculums to use, different ideas and book lists and all of that stuff. This is another good resource for your homeschool. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be a classical homeschooler. You can, choose what you like and leave the rest. And I really do encourage you to do that. Just take what works for you and your family and just let go of everything else. You don't need to follow everything to a T unless you want to. And that is part of the freedom of homeschooling. Then this last book is Educating the Wholehearted Child by Clay and Sally Clarkson. This is another great book. This does only go to age 14, but there are a lot of resources in here, the things that they used in their family, the types of rhythms that they implemented, and more specific things. And then also Sally Clarkson came out with her own homeschool memoir type book, Awaking Wonder, I think last year. It might have been in 2020. My years are running together, I'm not sure. But that's another more of an encouraging book. But this one has most of the resources listed. So this is another good reference book for your homeschool. Hi guys, this is Editing Heather jumping in and letting you know that I also wanted to talk about getting out of the public school mindset when it comes to high school, because I feel like when you first start homeschooling, yes, you go through this phase of just not knowing what to do, not knowing exactly what type of homeschool you want to have, and you do tend to lean on the public school a lot, but you can overcome that easily. But I do have to remind myself now, as my oldest is getting into high school level courses, that homeschool high school does not have to be the typical high school experience that you expect in public school. There are so many more options. You can do a lot of project-based learning. You can do exploring different interests. I know that one of my friends, her daughter had an Etsy shop that she used for like a senior project. And so all aspects of her senior year in high school was all about this Etsy shop, all of the production of the goods that she was selling, the business side of it, which, covers math and marketing and all kinds of stuff with running your own business. And so as I'm going through and figuring out what we're going to be doing for high school for Emma, I have to remind myself that it does not have to be US history, American Lit, English 1, Spanish. Well, she is going to continue to do Spanish. Doesn't have to look the same way. So while sometimes I do tend to look at what the public school requires, and obviously if you're homeschooling high school, you need to follow your state's guidelines as far as a homeschool diploma. In my state, there are not specific graduation requirements for homeschoolers, and homeschool parents get to decide when their child graduates from their homeschool. So I tend to look at what colleges require for acceptance and kind of base what we're doing off of that. But just because it says you have to have a government class, it doesn't mean that it has to be the government class that they do in public school. You can step way outside the box as long as you're keeping good records so that you can let them know, the colleges know, if your child is going that route. So I just wanted to jump in and say that even once you have done many, many years of homeschooling like we have, and then you start to think about high school transcripts, you start to get back into that mode of, okay, what is a credit? What constitutes a credit? What does my child need to take for like a college prep course? And so I just want to remind you that getting out of the public school mindset starts at the beginning of your homeschool, and then you're going to have to remind yourself when you get into high school as well. At least that's what I'm having to do. My next tip for a successful homeschool is don't be afraid to drop books that you or your kids do not like. And the reason that I say this is because there are so many wonderful books to read out there that if your kids are not connecting with a book, or if it's a book that you are just really slogging through, it's not worth it to continue. Now, I love reading. I read all the time. We actually use a literature-based curriculum. A lot of our learning is literature-based. So we do a lot of reading. And that means that there are some times that books are not great for our family. And I don't want to force my kids to constantly have to work through books that they're not connecting with. Now, does that mean that my kids will never read a book that they don't like? That's not the case. They do read books that they are not super excited about, but I don't want every single book that we read in a year to be something that they don't like and that they don't connect with. And the reason is because when you are forcing a child to read through something that they don't enjoy or don't connect with on some level, they aren't learning. They are just moving through the motions. They may answer all of the questions correctly. They may get what you want out of it, but it is not going to stay in their mind. They are going to immediately let that go. And I think about back, in high school for myself when I had to read a lot of books and I just didn't like them. I didn't want to read them, and I did read them, but they weren't enjoyable for me. And I didn't find value in it, and so I let it go. Now, some of those books I've come back to many years later, and because I've gone through a lot of life, I do appreciate the books now. But when I read them in high school, it just didn't work for me for whatever reason. So my advice is to just take a look at the book and give it a try, obviously. And if your kids don't like it after a few chapters, it's okay to put it down. If they are constantly complaining and don't want to do a specific read aloud or read a book, and they are just, having a bad attitude about it constantly, it's okay to put that book aside. Now, if you know that the bad attitude is not related to the book and it's something outside of the book, then obviously you need to address that. It's okay to put the book down and address whatever the root cause of that bad attitude is. Obviously, as your kids get into middle and high school, those teen hormones get going, and sometimes you need to step back from homeschool teacher and step into mom mode again and really figure out what is causing the issue. But if you know it's because your kids just hate a book and they just don't like it, it's okay to put it down. And every year I think we probably will skip a couple of books through all of the books that I choose, and that's okay. One of the books this year that Jack hated, I'm not sure if it's because he just didn't like the book or if he just didn't like the setup of the book, was The One and Only Ivan. I had chosen that as an arrow for him through Brave Writer, and he read about a third of the book, but the chapters were super short and he just didn't like it at all. So he put it away and he picked up something else. Sometimes when you have chosen all of your books and resources for the year, you don't want to put it away because you've spent money on it or you've put a lot of time and effort into finding the perfect curriculum or resource or book. And if it's not working, it's better for you to not keep trying to get through it and instead look for something different. Now, I'm not saying switch curriculum all the time. If that works for you, great. I am much more of a stay with curriculum for an entire year kind of person. And in fact, we have been with Sunlight. We've used Sunlight for the base of our curriculum for the past 11 years and loved it. So, but make it work for you. You don't have to follow exactly what the curriculum says. You can drop the book, because there are so many other wonderful resources. Now, I have a couple of book lists for you, places that you can find really good book lists to choose, new books if you need to. Ambleside Online is a Charlotte Mason-based homeschool curriculum. They have free lesson plans on there, but they list all of their books based on the year that it is. That's a great resource. Bookshark/Sunlight. Bookshark is the secular version of Sunlight, so they have some amazing books. I'm not sure if they have high school levels. Bookshark, they might. Sunlight has wonderful book lists. I love them. Some of the books for high school, I'm super excited that we get to do because they are some of my favorite books. I'm really excited about that. Build Your Library also has an amazing book list selection. They're also a literature-based curriculum, but instead of them sending you the books, you purchase the books on your own. And then the last resource, and this is more history-based, I guess, is Give Your Child the World by Jamie C. Martin. This breaks up book lists by area of the world and age. So if you are looking to expand your history options for reading, this is a really great book to have on hand. My last tip for a successful homeschool is to have a planning day and kind of do planning, prep, monthly wrap up, homeschool conferences with your kids all in one day. And I recommend scheduling this during your school week. You do not have to wait until the weekend to prep for homeschool. When I said at the beginning, get out of the public school mindset, I meant it. But in this case, teachers in the public school have planning periods. They have, half days where they have workshops. And it's okay for you to implement that in your homeschool. This is not something that I ever considered. I always did all of my homeschool prep on the weekends, usually on Sunday. And it did take a lot of time away from my family because we do a literature-based program, so I do read a lot of books and I'm constantly trying to make sure that I have notes that I need and I've gone through all of that information. But I think about 4 years ago, maybe 2017, I was reading an article that Jen McIntosh from Wildflowers and Marbles wrote about how she schedules a planning day monthly for homeschool work. She will use that time to work on the month ahead, and she would use that time for grading and any other things that she needed to do, just, the admin side of homeschooling. And when she said that, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Why don't I schedule a monthly planning day? This was also around the same time that I had seen a webinar with Laura Casey and Emily Lay. Laura Casey from Cultivate What Matters, she does the Power Sheets Goal Planner, which I use, and then Emily Lay from the Simplified brand, talking about a cultivated year and how each month they would sit down to work on birthdays and goal setting and planning for the month ahead. And I thought, well, that makes sense. And it also makes sense to have a homeschool planning day. And so I started putting a planning day on my calendar. And it does not mean that I use the entire day for planning. It does not mean that we take a full day off from school. We just have a lighter homeschool day. I sit down with all of the things that I need to get straight for the month ahead, and I work on those. Now, for homeschool planning, that is me looking at what went well in the previous month, the challenges that we had, and any changes that I feel like we need to make. I do sit down with my kids and have a little discussion about the same things. What do they think went well? What were their challenges? And are there any resources that they need for the month ahead on passion projects that we're working on? Because we do literature-based, but we also have an interest-led learning system as well. So I will go through those questions for myself. I will go through those questions mainly with my 2 older kids. I do ask Lucy as well. She enjoys having these meetings. She thinks it's like a special fun thing. And she usually comes up with, we should bake cookies more. We should go outside and play more. Emma and Jack should read me more stories. I usually do the bulk of the read alouds, but Lucy really likes it when Jack reads to her, so sometimes he gets put on read aloud duty. They're reading Alice in Wonderland together right now. It's really sweet. So I have this planning day on my calendar, and that is when I go through the month prior, the things that maybe I need to adjust or change, if there need to be any adjustments to our rhythm. And then I also look at the month ahead, and the things that I think about are what do we have on the schedule? Is it a busy month of appointments or activities outside of the house? That helps keep me in check with my planning so that I don't plan too much and then feel like we are drowning and not doing well. And then also, what books are we going to be using? What are the resources that we're going to be using? And familiarizing myself with those things so that I am able to facilitate conversation with my kids. We do a lot of narration, oral narration, written narration, and discussion about great books, and learning that way and really deep diving on topics that they find interesting that way. So I want to make sure that I am going into the month with some ideas. If we're doing an arrow or boomerang through Brave Writer, I try to at least go through the first couple of weeks of information in the arrow and boomerang guides. And then if we're working on some sort of a writing project, either through partnership, faltering ownership, or the help in the high school, which is something that we're just starting with Emma, I try to familiarize myself with that just so that I can figure out where am I going to piece all of these things in. And so if it's a super busy month, we won't do all of the things. I will back off on some of the things, and that's totally okay. If it is a month where we are just home and don't have a whole lot going on outside of the house, like January was. January was super cold here. It was below 0 so many days. So many days. And so we weren't going out all of the time. So we had a lot more time to work on things and really get back into our homeschool rhythm after taking the month of December off. So, it really just depends on your schedule and what works for you. I have put the 4th Thursday of the month on my calendar as a planning day for years now. And if you watch my goals video, you will know that the past several months have not really worked for that, partly because last semester my kids were back and forth to the public school every day, and so I just didn't have time to sit down and work on planning during the week. And then in January, when I was like, I'm going to get back into my planning day rhythm, Jack got sick on that day. So the day that I had planned to plan. You know how it is. The other part of my planning is to look at my daily habit tracker. This is a printable. If you're interested, I'll leave a link for it in the description box. I put the month and which kid it is right here, and then down the side, I will write all of the subjects that I want to cover. I won't just write English. I will break it down into the different English and language arts categories. Sometimes I will write chores down here, or character if we're working on specific character qualities. And then every day that we cover something in that subject, I will check it off so that at the end of the month, I have a good representation of what we have done for the month. I plan out things. I do some planning from behind where I will write down projects that my kids are working on, or if they take initiative to do something outside of what we're working on, I want to count all of that so I have a good representation of what my kids have done for the entire year. And this daily habit tracker helps me do that because then it's like a visual representation of what we've done. So I can see, oh, well, we only did science 3 days last month. So clearly I need to make some adjustments so that we can get back on track with science. And so that's kind of what I use that printable for. You know, you can use, there's actually, in my teacher planner that I use, the Erin Condren teacher planner, there are student checklists in the back that I used to use for my kids for that reason, the daily habit tracker. And I would write down the days of the month down here, and then I would write all of the things up at the top. But then now I have too many kids and there aren't enough checklist pages. They do have a checklist notebook, but my daily habit tracker works for well enough for me. So I just sit down with my teacher planner, and in the notes after the month, I will just write what went well and what were the challenges. And then I work on trying to figure out ways to fix those things so that in the month ahead, I'm constantly making little adjustments. I do not make huge adjustments to curriculum pretty much ever. I'm constantly using the same resources because I like them and they work well for my family. But this would also be where I would change up things if I know, okay, this is really not working for my kids. So put a planning day on your calendar each month so that you have the opportunity to look back on the month prior as well as look ahead to see what's coming up, and that will help you stay on track and make any adjustments that you need to. I find that it's easier to do it monthly than to wait until the end of the semester or to, you know, look ahead at the end of the year and sort of do a big sweep of what went well and what didn't. I do that as well, you know, as I'm planning for the new year. But if you are doing any sort of projects, or you let your kids follow their own interests in some specific subjects, or you want to make adjustments as you go along, having this monthly meeting and planning time really allows you to make small adjustments instead of having to make really big adjustments after you've gone through something for many months at once. And it just kind of, it's just a way to sort of help you stay on track. And it's something that has really helped my homeschool thrive, I think. So these are my 3 tips for a successful homeschool. I hope that it was informative to you. If you have questions about anything that I've talked about, please leave me a comment below, or you can always contact me. I have a link to my contact form in the description box. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye.